Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the July gathering of the Maine Public Book Club. I'm your host, Bill Nemitz, and this evening we welcome novelist Peter Nichols, author of a summer page-turner, if ever there was one, Granite Harbor. This book kept me up at night, partly because I couldn't stop reading it, and partly because once I finally turned off the light, there were certain, shall we say, images I couldn't quite get out of my head. Which is another way of saying there's plenty of fodder for a lively conversation this evening with Peter, who joins us from his home in Camden. But before we start, allow me to thank Sherman's Maine Coast Bookshops, the Park Danforth, and Coffee by Design for their generous support of the book club. Without their support, events like this would not be possible. I'd also like to give a shout out to our bookstore partners, where many of you picked up your copy of Granite Harbor, thanks to Book Stacks of Bucksport, None Such Books and More in South Portland, Mockingbird Bookshop in Bath, Sherman's Maine Coast Bookshops, DDG Booksellers in Farmington, Left Bank Books in Belfast, and the book tenders in York and Print in Portland. If you have a question during our conversation tonight, send it over to us at fun@mainepublic.org, and I'll try to work it into the conversation. So let's get started. I'll tell you a little bit about our author tonight. Peter Nichols is the author of the best-selling novel The Rocks, the nonfiction bestsellers A Voyage for Madmen and Evolution's Captain, and has written 3 other books of fiction, including this evening's selection, as well as nonfiction and a memoir. His novel, Voyage to the North Star, was nominated for the International Dublin Literary Award, and his journalism has been nominated for a Pushcart Prize. He's taught creative writing at Georgetown University, Bowdoin College, and NYU Paris. Prior to becoming a full-time writer, he held a 100-ton U.S. Coast Guard master license, was a professional yacht delivery man, sailed across the Atlantic 3 times, including once solo in a small boat, and was even a shepherd in Wales. As I said before, there's plenty to discuss here. Peter, welcome.
Bill, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm flattered and thrilled to be here.
It's great to have you. Listen, we've got some great audience questions tonight, so I am going to start off our conversation by going straight to a couple of them. The first is kind of a scene setter here, and this reader asks, how did the idea of writing this novel, the framework, actually come to the author? This person thought it had a very Twin Peaks vibe for him or her. How did this was this something that a dream, or was this something that took place over a long time?
A nightmare. No. Most of my books have a long gestation. And actually, in 1986, I was thinking about writing a novel about early whalers in colonial America. And somehow I came across the apothecary methods of that time. And I read that they used the skin of toads, or rather the skin of toads had efficacious properties. And for some reason, it's kind of a spoiler. For some reason, I won't describe the scene, but I had this image of something with a toad and a body. And so that I didn't know what to do with that. That was out of left field. And so 30, 40 years went by. But and then I hope you, that's it. Anyway, so then the other framework for this thing is that this is a novel about an author, a failed novelist, which of course that's very real to me, because to write is to fear failure. And a failed novelist who runs out of money and needs to make money, has a child, and finally casts about for a local job that might have some benefits and security. And he looks up in the local online what's offered, and there are 2 jobs going. One is school custodian, and the other is police officer. And this actually happened to me. I was living in Tucson for a while. to be close to my son. And I was broke and a long time between books. And so I did actually call up the Tucson Police Department. I was then middle-aged. I said, what's the upper age limit? And they said, oh, there's no upper age limit. If you can do the push-ups and run and qualify, then, and you've got a high school degree, then, you know, and I had a college degree. And so then come in. So I actually applied. And I went through everything, and I was invited to attend the police academy in that September. And I thought for a while, wow, you know, maybe I can write about this, or you know, and I started watching TV shows like The First 48, but I couldn't see myself as a policeman. And then as I got closer and closer, and I began literally and figuratively to sweat at the idea of that, I got an invitation from the Maine Media Workshops, then the Maine Photographic Workshops, to come and teach screenwriting. And I thought, this is a message from fate, you know. You're a teacher, you
Someone's
write.
trying to tell you something.
You're not a cop. So I hied me to Rockport and did that. But that stuck with me ever since, a closing doors sort of thing of, what if I'd become a police officer? What if I'd, you know, what it have been like, and what would my innate skills or the learned skills of being a novelist, how would I use those to be a policeman?
Right. Which is a strong theme early in the book,
Yeah.
particularly in the way that Chief Raintree. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to go to another question, and you've already answered it pretty much. This person asks, "Are you Alex?" He changes from one job career to another that isn't exactly linear. And I see in your bio that you have one of the most diverse resumes out there. And this reader adds, "What's up with being a shepherd?"
Oh, that was for writing, actually. Not that I thought about writing about it, but I was in London. I was living in London at the time, and I wanted to find some little gig that would pay me while I could write. And most jobs, you know, are 8-hour jobs. So there was an ad in the London Times saying, "Hand wanted, Hill Farm, Radnorshire, £10 a week." This was a long time ago. Food and cottage included. So I went up there, and I didn't know where Radnorshire was. It sounded like Scotland to me, even though I'd lived in Britain for a long time. It happened to be in the middle of Wales. And I went up and met the farmer and his wife, and they said, "Well, you know, we need someone about the place in the mornings. You feed the sheep and go get the sheep and do stuff like this, and then you have that little cottage there, and the rest of the day is yours." And so I went for it. And
this is the writer's dream come true, right?
it's a writer's dream come true. Yes, it was fantastic. And I was then reading D.H. Lawrence and people like that. So I was steeped in the sort of pastoral Britain, and, you know, there were streams and cows and sheep and whatever. The most interesting thing about it, I won't go on too long, but was working with the sheepdog. And the sheepdog
Oh, I
taught
was going to ask you if you did that.
I did. And there was a dog called Meg. And there's a lot of subtlety to it. But Meg had two primary commands: away, Meg, or come by, Meg. Away meant go that way around the back of the flock and drive them toward me, and come by went go that way. So, and Meg knew better than I exactly what was needed, but she's primed for the command. So I would say, right, away, Meg. And she'd start off, and then what? Oh, come by, Meg. And then she knew what it was. Then she was happy. So she taught me how to use her. It was fantastic.
Or she humored you anyway, huh?
She accommodated my ineptitude. It was great.
Well, yeah, I want to talk a little bit too. We're going to talk a lot about this, but this kind of nexus between the police officer and the writer. We spoke earlier, and I told you one of the things, whenever I look back on my journalism career, I always, you know, you wonder what else should I have done? And it might be because my grandfather was a detective with the Boston Police Department back in the day. But beyond that,
I could see that.
grew to see some real similarities between the work in terms of inquiry, imagination, creativity, which you don't normally associate with police work. But Alex certainly uses those intuitive skills, and Chief Raintree recognizes them.
Well, Chief Raintree, and to answer your questioner's question, there's a lot like me. There's a lot of me in Alex.
Mhm.
He has better hair, of course, but the Raintree says at one point, I've read your books. And
Right.
Alex can't believe this when he's applying for the job. He said, really? This guy read my books? And he said, yes. And of course I would. And if my other officers had written books, I'd read them too. I'd want to know who I've got here. And it seems to me that writing requires story, thoughtfulness, a sense of inquiry, following motives and things like that. And it may well be that your skills as a writer would be very suited to being a policeman and a detective. And there's one little thing I really don't want to read much, but as Raintree says at one point, so this is the police officer talking to Alex when he's applying to be a cop. Maybe your storyteller instincts will be of use to you as a detective. There's no such thing as a random, senseless crime. Behind every sad, sorry, dumbass crime is a story. And so, that's what Alex does. He's a storyteller. And from my own point of view, and for Alex too, I mean, I don't know a story really when I started. I really do write as if I'm watching a TV series and taking notes. I see what happens on spool in front of me. And so I find a story. I find by going where to go. And I think that's the same in detective work. You find something and you go with that. And it either leads you up a dead end or it takes you somewhere that's productive.
Yeah.
Very and I spent a lot of time writing this book thinking, what would I do? How would I do this? What do I know? And I put that into Alex, and I think it would made it an interesting dynamic for him.
Yes, definitely. I'm going to do a little excerpt myself because I'm jumping ahead here, but you're going right to the heart of what I thought. There was this one short passage from the book just hit me right between the eyes. And it's at the point where FBI agent Harris is lecturing Alex on how serial killers don't behave with the creative parameters of a novelist. And that leads to this passage. This is Alex thinking. Harris was mistaken, a common mistake. Alex didn't invent characters. He didn't try to give them credible motivation, project his own parameters of behavior onto them. Writing wasn't like that. Characters appeared whole, strange, sui generis with their own flaws and quirks. They weren't like you at all. You followed them, watched what they did, groped to discover and unveil the world they inhabited. You learned them. You were often astonished by their behavior. Uh, as I said, more than any other moment in the book, I heard Peter Nichols speaking there, in addition to Alex. And
That's
that,
exactly what it's like for me.
that,
So
that
that
you follow it.
I follow it, yes. And Robert Olin Butler, Pulitzer Prize winning novelist and short story writer, teaches writing, and he actually wrote a book called From Where You Dream. And that's a great book because he posits in there that you don't make, I mean, actually, there are writers that are called plotters, and then there are pantsers. The plotters plot and the pantsers write by the seat of their pants. And Robert Olin Butler takes that a step further. He says that really it's your subconscious is, there's all sorts of Jungian soup going on inside us. And when we allow ourselves, rather than think, we kind of let things happen, set a ball rolling, then it rolls, and you do find that these characters appear and they do things you wouldn't do yourself, you would not have imagined, and yet they do them, and they're integral to that character, and you go, oh, that's great, and you write that down, and it can
Well,
work
you
or not.
answered my question. I was going to ask if any of the characters surprised you, and it sounds to me like they were surprising you all the time.
Yes, they do. To some extent, Alex's ex-wife surprised me, although I know her very well. But she did some things that that I was glad she did because they were good for the book. Then there's the killer. The killer surprised me, and the people the killer knew, and the relationships the killer had with people.
Like with Nancy and
Yes, and careful, Bill. Who's with Nancy? You know, and she, you know, that I saw that happen, and it touched me. You know, because what I also wanted to do was not write a killer, a serial killer, as a sort of seething psychopath
Mhm.
who, you know, is you just say that this person's crazy, and then I wanted to understand him and see why he became that way.
Mhm.
And
Uh, I'm going to go to another reader question because it goes right to part of this. And this is kind of the elephant in the room for a lot of people anyway, so I'll throw it out there. This person says there are some pretty gruesome scenes in this book. I bet many people skip over them. In fact, I know I read some reviews in which people said they loved the book, but they couldn't get through certain parts of it. Uh, so this reader asks, how were these scenes important to convey as you did?
it's very interesting, actually, because as you know, early on in the book, there's a scene of a terrible visual, and something awful has been done to someone, a teenager.
Yeah,
And
you can tell us. We're operating under the assumption that people have all read the
okay,
book.
well, anyway, this terrible thing has happened to this teenager, and that's the crime that launches the story. And none of these sensitive readers were bothered by that thing being inflicted upon teenagers. But when it came to being inflicted on an animal, like a coyote, where the killer is learning his trade, as it were, they couldn't bear it. So there were these reviews that said, skip chapter 35. It's, you know, animal cruelty. I couldn't do it. It was triggered everything for me. But they were happy to see it happen to a poor boy.
I noticed the same thing, and I had the same reaction. It's like, wait a minute, yeah, the coyote got a raw deal here. There's no question about it. But what about the kids? You
Yeah,
know,
I know the kids, the poor boys. But when I wrote the coyote, it is a hard scene to read. And
yes.
it wasn't a hard scene to write, actually. It was but one of these things where there's this character, uh, Ivan. You know, it's been a long time since Ivan, right? Yeah.
Ivan Haney. Yeah.
The killer's mentor.
Mhm.
And I just thought, what would Ivan do here? And that's really the thing that I do with characters. You know, it's not something I would do. It's a scene of incredible cruelty, but also unfeelingness. How does a
Mhm.
killer have no feeling, you know? And so the killer watches as Ivan does this thing to a coyote. And I wrote it as best I could. I mean, I see this thing, and then I bring my abilities, whatever they are, to how is the coyote taking this, and you know, how is it moving, and
Mhm.
what is the onlooker thinking when he's looking at it, and stuff like that. So it was a scene that sort of wrote itself, and then it gets rewritten many times. But uh, so that's how that stuff happens. It's not something that actually occurred to me. That's that's a funny dichotomy or dynamic about writing is you set all the stuff in train, as I've said, and then things come and you see them and you write them down. That's the fun part of writing to me. That's what if I had to sort of make a plot and an outline and stick to
Outline,
that,
right.
I'd be
Mhm.
bored rigid. But it's like going to a movie.
Yeah.
Oh, I hadn't imagined that.
You see that coming. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
Speaking of Ivan, very a fascinating character. And as he
I love him.
takes this young outcast at the school under his wing, does he know what he's creating?
No, I don't think so. But I think no, I don't think so at all, because I don't think Ivan would be a serial killer.
No,
But I
no.
think he realizes
Yet,
this.
yet when he dies, that's pretty much the
Yes,
script that
he
follows.
understands what that person is doing to him, and they kind of unspokenly agree about it. But I think what he feels is he sees how this poor boy is abused and bullied and tortured at school. So he takes him under his wing, and he finds in him a receptacle. The boy is very receptive to Ivan's teachings, or to Ivan's code, as it were. It's kind of like Dexter, in Dexter, there's a code, if anyone's seen that sort of show. And Ivan has a code of behavior, of consequences and cause and effect and things like that. And he finds this boy is this is what the boy learns at school. He doesn't learn his ABCs, but he learns a lot from Ivan. And that was all fun to write.
No question. Let's talk a little bit about Granite Harbor. First of all, I was curious because the Granite Harbor Living History Settlement is kind of a setting within the setting of Granite Harbor, if you will, and it's where some of the characters, I'm thinking in particular of Roger Priestley, seem to have one foot in their modern day identity and one foot in their historical character. I'm curious in capturing, and I've been to these kind of places from time to time.
Like Plymouth maps, like Plymouth Plantation. Have you been there?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Did you visit any of these places to kind of get the feel for how they operate?
I did visit Plymouth, and it made a profound effect on me. And that was 30 years ago or 40 years ago when I was thinking about writing a colonial history of whaling as a novel. And then and that's when I read at the time about the apothecary uses of the toad's skin. But so I remember going to Plymouth Plantation and being struck by the way these people didn't say, it wasn't pedagogical. They didn't say, well, this is the way they lived, or this is what they ate. It's, oh, I come over on the Mayflower, and I was 16, 20, 19, and my father, he came with me, but he died on the way. And then I would ask her questions, well, how do you find the New World? Oh, it's something dark and horrible, but this is our place now, and the good Lord. So I was struck by the degree and the depth to which these people had acquired and learned and researched these persona. And so I wanted something like that to be happening around in Maine, and there, God knows, we've got a lot of wonderful colonial history here, and that's what I was. So I wanted to make.
They had a very authentic feel to it. Let's go down the road a little bit to Granite Harbor itself, which anybody who's been in Maine any amount of time is going to figure out it's your hometown.
Yes, it's Camden, Maine. Yes.
That's right.
In fact, I give Alex my address, but I shouldn't say that.
You did what?
I give Alex my address. Alex lives in the house where I have lived.
Oh, okay. How, aside from the geographical references, which are a lot of fun for anybody that has any detailed knowledge of that area, how does Granite Harbor socially, culturally resemble the Camden you live in or not? I mean, would you say there are very close parallels between the two?
Probably. I think so. I mean, yeah, I don't want to
get you in trouble here.
Yeah, no, but one of the windows into Camden that I have is my 21-year-old son. So, there are young people. And one of the things I loved writing about in this book, which was very true, was the relationship between single parents and teenage children. That's a constant, difficult, and rewarding and a frightening reality. But so my son and his friends, I know some kids here and know what they get up to, and so that was a window into. So I would say in that respect, but that might be any town in America, but that was what I wrote about there. And then I think I mentioned that Granite Harbor is a place where wealthy people come in the summer and to play around on boats and whatever. But so I think they're sort of the same, really. It's
how is this book received in Camden?
Well, they haven't been out on the streets in demonstrating, but my friends who live here have all loved it and all enjoyed the verisimilitude, the Bayview Street, yes, and you got that just right, and Brown and Court is obviously French and Braun, and so on. So, but I wrote most of this book in Paris. I wrote all of the first draft of the book in Paris. And while I was there, I was able to not be here. And so the Granite Harbor and Camden in my imagination, the edges were softened. And Graham Greene
Okay.
once said, "Forgetting is the compost of the imagination."
Yeah,
So when
so
you
there's less
forget,
less distraction.
yes, when you forget it slightly and then re-remember it in the context or remember it in the context of what you're trying to write, it shapeshifts slightly to accommodate what you're trying to present.
Mhm. Uh, I'm going to go to another reader question here. This person writes, "This is what I call a momentum book. Starts very slowly with lots of backstory and then starts picking up pace faster and faster. I couldn't put it down. Was this the author's intention, or did it just roll out that way at that quickening pace?"
Um, I wanted it, you wanted to start fast, but I was very, I wanted very much to establish the characters not as the cop, the neighbor, the woman, the whatever. I
Mhm.
wanted to give backstory to these things, and I wanted to feel. I believed that if I did that, if I developed the characters early on, um, and certainly, the murder appears quite
That's
quickly in
true.
the
Yeah.
book, but then rather than pressing on with the detection and all the rest of it, I did stop to give a lot of backstory about Alex because I thought it just made him real. He's vulnerable. He's messed up. He's insecure. He's very anxious about his state as a writer and as a single father and stuff like that. And I thought that made him more interesting and
Mhm.
more realistic. And so also the people around him and Isabel, the woman who also figures largely in the story, who was once his lady friend and maybe again, we hope.
Mhm.
And so, and I just thought that will either, there are genre readers who don't like that. I found in the writing, this is the only genre book I've written, thriller. And I found that a lot of people thought that was just wasted time. They just want to go straight in.
They don't want the sappy stuff, huh?
Yeah, and they said, "Oh, started very slowly, and and too much story about these people." But I don't know how else to do it, and that made
Yeah.
it real for me. Ultimately, I'm writing for me. I have to write people who come alive, and then I
Mhm.
watch what they do.
Yeah. You mentioned Alex and his moments of uncertainty. There are times I noticed several times in the story where Alex seems lost. He's maybe even a little desperate as the community clamors for answers that, frankly, he
He
doesn't
doesn't
have
have,
yet.
yeah,
Uh,
and
and
doesn't
I
know where to
wonder if there
look.
were times, and maybe not based on your description so far, but were there times in the book when you had the same feeling as
Oh,
Alex's
yes,
creator? Like, I
I
don't know
don't.
where this is
Yes,
going.
yes, I don't know what's happening. I really don't. I know that certain things have to happen. And also with thrillers, I don't read a lot of thrillers, but I read some, and some are terrific. There are many good ones in there. But you have to divert the reader and withhold information, and you have to send them off down dead ends and have reversals and things like that. So in a technical, objective way, I knew that those things had to happen. But there's a scene in which Alex, he doesn't know what else to do, so he goes to the library to sort of read history. He's reading up about the settlement. There's something that he thinks has to do with the settlement, this recreated settlement that has to do with it, and he doesn't know what, and he doesn't know why. It's just an intuition. And
Mhm.
when you write, you're running on intuition and nothing else. And so I have him go to the library and sit in a nice wing chair in the library and start reading books about colonial Maine to see if anything jumps out at him. But he's also feeling very guilty because he knows he should be out there like some TV detective solving a mystery and driving about and apprehending people. But he's really in the place that he loves most in the world, a room full of books and a library.
Yeah.
And he does, I think he does come across something there. And coming out of the library, he has an encounter with the kids who all wonder what he's doing and stuff. So it was certainly bringing out my own But that works. That's good because I sort of paint myself into a corner like that. And then as Raymond Chandler said, when he didn't know what was happening, he would have a man burst into a room with a gun. And then he'd have to explain that man, but it would give him something to do. So there's
Right.
you sort of do that. You paint yourself into a corner and you know something's got to happen. And then so you think of stuff that you think of.
But he's also doing the work of a writer, and
Yes.
that takes us back to this juxtaposition of his current occupation and his prior career and passion. Uh, I think you might have an excerpt about that with the chief when he was talking to her. Maybe this would be a good time for you to share it with us.
Well, when he first meets the chief, Billy Raintree, aka Belinda Raintree is her name. She's the chief of police, and gay. She says to him, "You're a book writer." "Yes, chief. I've been a professor of creative writing here and there too. Those were temporary positions. I'm not writing much now." "You're going to jump ship when the inspiration hits?" the chief asked him. With piercing accuracy, Chief Raintree had shot straight to the heart of his career plan. This, he hoped, would be a day job to tide him over until writing could support him again. "Writing's really a part-time thing for me," he said. "So's the teaching. I want a full-time job." Alex wondered if the chief heard the lie. "Well, why policeman? You want to write mysteries?" And Alex thinks, because it's the only job I can find in this small town for an otherwise unskilled creative type. He had prepared a better answer, most of it true. "I have a child. I need a more reliable income. I want to do what I can here in Granite Harbor, be a more active member of the community, perhaps make a difference to the place where my daughter is growing up." And then Chief Raintree looks down at his application. And then there's the later scene where the chief says that thing. As the minutes tick by. That's where the thing where the chief says, "Maybe your storyteller instincts will be of use to you as a detective."
Right, right.
There's no such thing as random senseless crime. Behind every sad story is a crime is a story.
Hmm. Huh.
All of that made it very real to me, and so I hope that what was very real to me and I thought quite credible, I mean, people think, well, how can a novelist get a job as a detective? And really, well, A, I'd done a bit of research in Arizona about that, and B, it's true, I mean, I just thought that made it realistic.
Well, it goes to the condition of many police departments in Maine and elsewhere these days, where there's just a terrible shortage of applicants. So
they can't get people.
I'm not sure that lowers the bar, but it certainly attracts people from more diverse backgrounds than you might normally expect.
As I can't find the spot where Billy Raintree said, we do want someone different. We could use someone different,
Right.
Someone who, skills that wouldn't seem to be exactly for this, but that might actually work out very well. A sense of inquiry and stuff. So that's why it seemed quite real to me.
Yeah. I'm going to shift gears a little bit here and go to another reader question. What was it like for the author to write from the serial killer's perspective?
That was great because they say write what you know. Well, I mean, I do know about the Alex and being a writer and even trying to get a job as a policeman, but being a serial killer, that's another whole thing. And I had to. I didn't actually so much do research with that, but I did have a feeling that I wanted to make, as I've said, I didn't want to make the killer a sort of just a psychopath so I could have him do anything and behave eccentrically or I wanted to see where he came from and who he'd been. So I started him off as a very young boy and see what happens to him. Not that this is, that doesn't necessarily make a serial killer too. But, and he's not, I don't know what he is. I am not a psychologist, but uh, I created a character, you know, and they say obviously your bad characters, your wicked characters, your nasty characters, they're a gift to a novelist because they're
Mm.
fun to write and you explore. Actors talk about, oh, I got to be, you know, Hannibal Lecter, Anthony Hopkins would say, and it was great fun because I got to explore, inhabit this space that I would never otherwise even dream of. And it's the same with a writer. You do some sort of method acting when you write. And so I created this character and I inhabited him and I saw his needs and his inadequacies. And I also saw how other people would see him when they didn't know he was a killer, but feel sorry for him. And thus he gets a certain sort of social status, or not status is the wrong word, but he makes friends.
Yeah.
And he's a person who isn't easily given to friendship and he's a weird guy for sure, but he does make friends and even has a girlfriend.
Okay.
So it was fun to write him, and it was fun to write Ivan Haney too, his mentor, who is not a killer, but is certainly a man with a very skewed moral sense and code, and also a man of some great autodidactic learning. And so it was fun to just get into these people and explore them.
Yeah, Ivan Haney reminded me of the I can't remember his name now, the grizzled old shark hunter in Jaws, you know, who
Yes,
has,
he is
you
kind
know,
of like is it McMurphy or whatever, the Robert Shaw
yeah,
character.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
great. Yeah. A man who
yeah,
knows his own world absolutely and has no, you know, time for anybody who disagrees with him. I
right,
just watched
right.
Jaws recently. It's great.
Yeah. The irony behind Chester is that what I see throughout much of his life, and even if you look at the ultimate motive of his crimes, is that he wants to be more lovable. He wants to be in a position where people will love him and he can trust that that's genuine. I'm thinking about Sally was the girl, yeah, the
Yes,
cousin,
Sally.
and
Mm.
and yet he turns into it becomes something so monstrous. I think that's very interesting. Uh,
Well, that's why I give him a childhood that's very he's faced rejection and abuse, which is normal, you know, it happens a lot. But the people to whom he's entrusted as a child also, you know, abuse him and terribly, and without, you know, and his this family of cousins that he goes to live with, stuff goes on there that the parents don't know about, and he's blamed for. And then he goes to this school for difficult children, and that where he completes his education. And it he and inside him is this we all have is this wanting to be loved, wanting to be
mhm,
seen, wanting to be accepted.
right.
And through Ivan Haney, his mentor, who's this groundskeeper at this school, who's an ex-Vietnam vet with a very harsh code of behavior and stuff. He responds to Ivan and he is accepted by Ivan. And so he places great store in Ivan's worldview and code. And somehow he can also, you know, does make a relationship or two. But the things that he does are mostly they're connected to his, as you say, his wish to be loved and accepted, or he wants to be like so and so and be more attractive to people, to women, to people, to make friends and stuff like
Yeah,
that. And I think this is a, you know, whether you're a serial killer or not, this is probably a very general human motivation and wish to be
yeah.
loved.
It's interesting. Ivan, in fact, in the end, professes his love for Chester, which was
Yes,
a
Chester
very
and Ivan.
surprising moment for me.
Yeah, Chester finds that he and Ivan have become a family.
Yeah,
You know, and
right.
so and Chester and Ivan believes that too. Ivan's never had an acolyte or anybody who's, you know, been as close to him or responded to him or has been as good to him in his old age as Chester is.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
there's a little mini love story right there.
Yeah, yeah. I want to talk about a couple of other characters too. Isabel, I was fascinated by Isabel
I
and
love Isabel.
how she kind of stood apart from in many ways from the other characters, including when after the three Shane's three friends get the temporary tattoo of Shane across their forehead. Sometime later, she does the same thing. How did that come to you? And was that one of those, wow, I didn't know she was going to do that
Yes,
moment?
yes. I thought about Isabel, and she's going through what happens to a lot of parents of probably all children, but single children, which is my bailiwick. And uh, she's reached an impasse with her kid, Ethan. He's in that loutish, boorish, rude stage where he's saying to his mother, he doesn't want to listen to anything she's saying, and she can't communicate to him. What's happened to my little boy? And he's gone and got this, as a lot of these kids have, in solidarity with their murdered friend. They've had his name temporary tattooed across their forehead. And the boy who was killed, his name is Shane, but it also can look like shame when
Hmm.
it's seen. And she's wondering, how can I reach? How can I connect with Ethan? And so she comes home, and Ethan she says, come to dinner, and he's at dinner, and he doesn't even look at her. He's just shoveling food in his mouth, and she says something. He looks up and he goes, "Oh my God!" And she's done the same thing, and she's got this tattoo all over her forehead, and he loves
And
her.
then he says, I love you, Mom. I love you.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Uh,
it's a way that at that moment when they need to, they can connect. And
yes.
that's what parents are always trying to do, and children too, trying to find, I mean, you say you've had children and teenage children. Being a parent's the most difficult thing on earth, I think. I mean, against which, being an astronaut or learning celestial navigation or whatever it is nothing. It's the hardest thing, and no one prepares us for it. And so we get to teenagehood, with our teenager, and we just, we don't know what to do. And so there's a lot of that in the book too, which
Yeah,
I love
I'm looking
because
back on
that
those
I
years
know.
in my life thinking I should have got a tattoo on my forehead. Maybe.
There are
Might
moments
have.
for it, yes, as long as it can rub off.
Yeah,
But
right,
no,
right. Let's
I'm
talk
fine
about
with.
Morgana too. Another fascinating character, and again, who just absolutely shocked me in the climax of the story when Chester's clearly being shot, but for a few seconds you don't know by whom. And I'm thinking, it's one of the other officers has arrived on the scene or whatever it might be. And there she is holding her chrome-plated snub-nosed revolver and
And loving it.
I, and loving every minute of it. That's right. Uh, what what role is she simply is her primary role here just to be Alex's antagonist? Uh, why did she stick around? Is it was I guess what I wondered. He stuck. Was it also because of Sophie, the daughter, or was
Well,
there something else keeping her?
they moved to Granite Harbor
Right.
as a couple, and there they split up and get divorced.
Yeah.
And so they're like a lot of divorce, but they're in town. They have a child. The child's in the local school. They're going to stay there, and so and she's wealthy. She has a
Yeah.
life, and he doesn't have that life. And so she's this person. I mean, I have to say she's based on someone I know intimately well, um, but she's not entirely my ex-wife, my son's mother. But she's a Texan, and Texans are a whole other thing. And
Right.
as we may
She's a
know,
fish out of water.
yes, and she was suggested by my son's mother for various reasons, who is a Texan. But I don't know if this will. I'm sure this won't get back to her. But anyway, she's read the book, and Morgana is not her, but Morgana. But that's one of those things where you take a given entity and you can really expand and grow with it. And so the whole thing about the way she dresses is I made that up, and her shooting, and stuff like that. But the other thing about who shoots whom at the end, most of these stories they're kind of like movies where the hero or whoever is put in an, a seemingly death, situation, and the killer is going to kill them, and somehow something happens. Either it's an accident or the killer has secreted something about the detective has got something and can switch and finally shoots the bad guy. I didn't want that. It was just so old hat. I mean, so I wanted something literally out of left field. And so
Yeah.
as Morgana she's way ahead of him in police skills, basically. Perhaps because she's a Texan or simply because she's ornery. And but she knows where Sophie is. She's tracing her phone, tracking her phone, and sort of collars Alex and says, we got to go get them and stuff like that. So we know that she knows kind of where Alex is and what's going on. And although he's told her to get the hell away, this is police business.
Right.
And so at the end, it's not a surprise, but it's a surprise that she is the one who, I mean, I don't know how much we give away, really, or how many
And
people.
he, in fact, has been separated from his gun at that point, where
And
he's
he's,
reaching for
lost his
no
gun, which also happens, but then he gets whatever, and typically they find something or he hits him over the head with a stick. None of that. I wanted Alex to be actually to fail as a policeman at the end, but he hasn't failed because he has also used his intuition to believe Isabel when Isabel says, this is where we have to go. Because Isabel has a little psychic power too. And so I liked his trust in Isabel. And I liked the fact that his intuition, his writer's intuition, led him to the spot where the denouement happens. And Morgana has basically followed him out of orneriness and wanting control of every possible situation, and she's ready. She's ready.
So here's my big question: there's a suggestion at the end of the book that Morgana should run for sheriff, and I loved Sophie's line when she's talking to Alex about it, and he says, "No, I'm a municipal cop. She's the county. There's no conflict there." And Sophie's musing to herself, it's the first time in her life there's been no conflict between her parents' roles. But if there were a sequel, and I'm not suggesting if there were, would Morgana be elected sheriff?
No, I think that was just to sort of give Alex the heebie-jeebies. It's just because what does he do when Sophie tells them that several people have lobbied to make Morgana the county sheriff or whatever, and what does he do? He sits down on his prized sofa, which is the only remnant of his writerly success, and pours himself a strong shot of Johnny Walker Black and flips on the BBC, which is both of which is his escape routes. But no, if there were a sequel, I've thought about it, and I think Peril of Children is probably where I would go. Something would happen to Sophie or Ethan or something, and that would make these otherwise antagonistic characters coalesce around the need to do something.
Yeah. Well, what is next? What are you working on anything right now?
I've written a novel that I wrote Granite Harbor in Paris. While I was sitting here for the last year, I wrote a book set in Paris, a novel set in Paris that is not a genre book, although there is a death in it. And it's about an American writer in Paris who's estranged from his son and has a love affair, and there's a death, and there's a bit of a odyssey with some characters through France and Paris. And I loved writing it. It was very real to me, although it was made up. And now I'm writing a book, if I continue it. Philip Roth said he wished he could write one book for the rest of his life, so he wouldn't go through the torment of having to figure out what's next at the end of each book. Because he tried start and start, and so it's a torment for me. But so I always stop and start, and I have a file of unwritten, unfinished novels. But there is something I'm writing that may be a historical novel about a family, a dysfunctional family, set in Maine in the 1930s, and with an unfortunate, tragic outcome.
Oh, well, that sounds like something worth looking forward to.
Yes.
Yeah, I wish we had more time, but believe it or not, we have run the string here. And
It
but
went very fast. I love it. I could have, and you're a wonderful interlocutor, Bill.
oh,
It's
thank
great.
you, thank
Great.
you. Well, I have enjoyed talking as much as I enjoyed reading the book. The occasional
Thank
waking up suddenly, notwithstanding.
Yes,
But I guess that's
and
a sign of a good book.
knowing the difference between frogs and toads now, and the
That's
properties
right. That's right.
with
And all I thought about toads before was you get warts from them, but I guess
yeah,
that's not
yeah.
true.
And frogs'
And
legs you can eat, but
there you go.
and we
There you
haven't
go.
touched on the DMT. That's a whole trip. Pardon the
Oh,
pun
that's
in
right.
itself.
Yeah, yeah,
But anyway, that's good. Yes, the toad has certain properties, and they're
yeah.
useful.
Well,
All
again,
right.
thank you for joining us tonight, Peter. It's been really wonderful. It was a great read, and we look forward to the next one.
Thank you, and thanks for your listeners and the people who sent in questions and the people who have read the book and hopefully may
Sure.
yet haven't. All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
And I want to thank all of you for being with us tonight as well. Thanks once again also to, if I can find it here, which I can't. There we go. I've buried all my papers under my notes here. Thanks once again to Sherman's Maine Coast Bookshops, the Park Danforth, and Coffee by Design for sponsoring tonight's event. Our next book club meeting will be on August 28th at 7 p.m. We will welcome Shannon M. Parker to talk about her novel, Love and Lobsters. That conversation, like all of our gatherings, will be live streamed on Facebook and YouTube. Peter, thanks again. Great chatting. Thank all of you, and we'll see you in August. Have a good night.